Okay, guys, so welcome to my first webinar on how to hire and manage only superstars, part one. So today we're going to go through these key areas: the position descriptions, how to write your recruiting ads, and what we do for the first interview. So some things I'm going to probably fly through pretty quick, but I've given you some really good examples of pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about today. Next week, we're going to dive into what happens after the first interview, what we do with our internships, our second interviews, and ultimately how we hire and train these people and manage them with their KPIs. So the first thing in terms of hiring only the right people is really to get intentional about what it is that these people are going to be doing. So grab a pen and paper, give yourself 15, 20 minutes, and just start by writing out every little thing that you could think of that this person will do in a day. What you see here is what was narrowed down to the bullet points of the day-to-day activities for our accountability coach. The little blue links that you see, so this actually made it to the first page of our operations manual, which we'll talk about on the next webinar also. And each of those blue links goes to the policy pertaining to that particular item, showing them how they do it, how it's completed, and what their day looks like. So you might find that your initial list of what this person's going to do in a day is much longer than this, and that's totally okay. Because once you have that long list of every little thing that you can think of that they'll do in a day, just start eliminating the things that probably feel like common sense or might be a bit redundant, etc., or even leave them in there as a reference for you to think about as you're writing the recruiting ads. But what we learned with the operations manuals, for example, and we'll get into this in more detail in the next webinar, is that less is definitely more. People's attention span is shorter than ever. The more we can eliminate that should hopefully be common sense or it can't be misunderstood, and really include the nuts and bolts of the things that we really need them to learn, we find that this is the fastest and most effective way to learn. So remember, as we go forward, when we're hiring these people, we really, the goal is to hire people that are naturally motivated and naturally enjoy the things that we want them to do on a day-to-day basis. And that generally makes their intuition as far as how to do things much, much better. It's not so much the job of the manuals and the interview at this point to give them every single little detail, but to ensure that they get or grasp the concept of what it would be like to be in that position and perform at a level, a 70 or 80% pretty naturally. So the goal is to minimize your investment in training by finding people that are naturally motivated to do the things that you want them to do. So I've given you examples for each of the positions that we run: the accountability coach, the admin, the sales manager, and as far as the trainer, kind of what their day-to-day activities typically look like. So I would use my list perhaps as a starting place and kind of ask yourself, do these things make sense for my business? What sort of things is missing from this list that might be unique to my business? And really develop that good long list of things that you expect somebody to do during any given day during the workday. So let's talk about recruiting ads. Your ads are so important, and this first guy, Lou Adler, really changed everything for me as far as my recruiting ads. Many years ago, we found we were in a position where we were having a lot of turnover with staff. In that they, it seemed like we just constantly were hiring the wrong people or making mistakes. We would get people coming in, applying for our positions. They were super excited, enthusiastic about the position, only to find out that they really didn't perform well. Maybe they didn't have the necessary skills. Maybe they didn't have a good natural fit for the position itself. So we really had to kind of consider what was it that we were doing wrong in that initial stage for recruiting. What Lou Adler really taught me, and specifically that article on LinkedIn, is such a great summary. His whole book, Hiring and Getting Hired, it's a good read, but that article is such a great summary of the key things that I found in the book. And really it was, number one, I learned that I was being far too optimistic in my recruiting ads. The marketer in me would come out. I would write how exciting the position was and how good or fun it was going to be. And I would really focus on selling the position unknowingly. And what I learned with recruiting ads in particular is don't sell the position. In fact, we'll get to this a little bit more, but you kind of want to turn on your anti-marketing voice where you're almost kind of telling them how not fun it is or what the crappy parts of the position are. Jeff Smart with the book Who, another fantastic recruiting book that really teaches you about the right questions to ask in your interviews, what sort of personality traits and stuff we're looking for when we're hiring somebody, because it's really, we get so kind of lost in looking at people and evaluating whether their personality is right that we sometimes kind of miss the point of asking the right questions. All right, I'm just gonna throw my headset in here because otherwise you might hear my dogs barking back here pretty soon. Um, so these two books, really strong recommendations for hiring and recruiting and learning how to hire the right people. All right, let's talk about some ad writing tips. So as I mentioned, first, turn on your anti-marketing voice. Don't sell the position. Instead of kind of highlight the not so fun things, because after all, we want to hire somebody that actually wants to do them. I can't stress how important this is. Your job descriptions or your recruiting ads don't need to necessarily sound fun. And we want to give somebody a real world view of what their day-to-day activities are going to look like. But it is also important within that to describe what best performance looks like. So for example, in our trainer ads, you'll find that in our trainer ads, we talk about how the real job actually occurs outside the training session. Because in my opinion, as a personal trainer, if you show up to boot camps or group classes or even one-on-one training sessions and you give clients a great experience, that's fantastic, but that's still the minimum performance. As trainers, the real magic happens for us when we connect with our clients. We develop a bond, a sense of trust by following up with them and legitimately caring outside of their workouts. After all, I've always said we can't change somebody's life in 30 or 60 minutes. We can only hope to influence the things that they do in the other 23 hours a day. And this is where the real magic happens as a trainer. So in my recruiting ads, I want to make that clear that that's what best performance looks like. It's beyond the hours that you're going to be paid for. And that is the expectation that being paid for those hours, you'll still put in some additional time to do the follow-up and kind of relationship management with your clients. So be sure to feature the things they'll actually do in the day, which is why your position descriptions that you just wrote are now so helpful. Many of those things should find their way into your recruiting ads. We need to let people know what is it that they'll be doing on a day-to-day basis. So list them off for them, explain to them kind of here's what your day looks like. Here's how you'll spend those activities. Here's the hours that you'll be doing it. What are the things that they're going to actually have to do? And finally, as your ad winds down, we want to give it the all-important conclusion. It's much like a movie. We got to have a climax somewhere. And this is the part that potential employees certainly become interested in. So what does this career path look like in the short term? What does it look like long term? Because I don't know about you, but I got really tired of having people only stick around for a few months. I mean, I want to try to keep these people as long as I can. The reality is in our organizations, there's only so much movement a person can experience. And if you're trying to climb the corporate ladder or you're looking for constant increases in your wages and compensation to be able to build a long career path, it can be difficult to do inside of our studios. So it's really important, I think, to show what short and long term looks like for that potential employee, because why hire somebody that has expectations of something that you can't ultimately fulfill? Finally, always at the end, and just actually last thing on short and long-term expectations, you'll notice that I like to be fairly clear about what compensation looks like. Again, I don't really want to get that superstar person in only to realize that no matter how much I love them, I simply can't afford them. So I'd rather kind of be open and honest with people in terms of what I expect to compensate them in an effort to only have people apply that I can definitely afford or that I know will be willing to accept the position for the compensation that I have in mind. Now at the end is the time to list your desired qualifications and experience. I just like to use bullet points for this. Here's what my expectations are of you, and here's the kind of things that would be bonuses that I would love to have that are not necessarily necessary. Finally, read through your ads again and see that you've avoided the person description. And I didn't really know what this meant until I read the article that I gave you from Lou Adler, and that our tendency is really to use a lot of verbiage like looking for that super enthusiastic, highly motivated individual, that just wants to rock it out and take care of our clients and deliver them an amazing experience. Well, as wonderful as that sounds, it's kind of like our marketing voice again, because we really haven't given them any clear direction in terms of what that means. And we've totally left it open to interpretation for them as to what motivated, enthusiastic, hardworking, organized might look like. We must be more specific and detail that for them. So what I realized here on the last slide is I meant to actually post in a sample of one of our recruiting ads. And I will do that before I post the PowerPoint online. So after the webinar, I'm going to post a video for you guys. I'll post this PowerPoint as well, so you have all the verbiage that's in the PowerPoint. And I'll add one of our sample recruiting ads for you to see, and you can kind of read through how I've applied all the things I've just told you. Now, reviewing submissions, this may surprise you, but I've actually very rarely look at many of the details on a resume. There's only really the two things that I'm looking for. It always makes me nervous when people have jumped around from job to job and they haven't stated any job for any particular time. Usually I like to see people that have stayed at jobs for a year or longer, but I try not to judge people that have moved around more. Instead, it prompts me to ask the question, why? Why have you moved around so much? Why have you not stuck at any job for very long? And sometimes you'll be surprised at people's answers and they'll really impress you. The key things I really look for on the resume is the volunteer experience, the awards, and what I call the special extras. I really like to hire people that have a kind of track record for giving of themselves, so to speak. You know, people that received awards or recognition, perhaps received promotions without asking, which you'll typically find out in the first interview. I like people that volunteer their time and give them themselves to different causes. And I like people that show those special extras that show that they have a track record of investing in themselves and continuing education. It's always great if it's industry related, but I don't necessarily care about that. I'm really just looking for a certain personality type or people with a certain track record. Now, one of the biggest things for me is the tonality of their response in their submission. You know, you get these people that submit their resumes with very vague and professional language. You can pretty much always tell it was copy and pasted. Quite often, don't even look at the resume when I get those responses. I want to see people that have tried to be creative, much like we are with our emails when we send to our clients. We know that that subject line and those first two sentences in the email are extremely important. And I want to see how people have responded to me and my recruiting ad, showing kind of a level of personality or enthusiasm for this particular position. I'm not really interested in hiring people that I know blanket are applying for 50 different positions and willing to take whichever one comes up first, because chances are, even if they accept my position, if something better that they perceive to be better comes along quickly, they're going to move on quickly. So that tonality of their response is super, super important. Next, I do everything I can to see if I can find them on Facebook, look at what their recent posts look like. I creep their pictures and things like that. And I think you can really tell a lot about a person by looking at their pictures and what they display on Facebook. So it really is all about finding the right personalities for our organization. Any submissions of interest that I get, I immediately reply and ask a couple of questions. I want to see how fast they're going to respond, and I want to see what their answers look like to those questions. So here's actually a really perfect example, and I literally just got this last night as we're hiring another full-time person for my Edmonton locations. So in this particular case, I've taken a different strategy. We really need a trainer, but I've been having a hard time getting application submissions for a trainer. So as many of you know already with me, most of our trainers actually fulfill a secondary role. A secondary thing that we need to fulfill is an admin role between our two facilities. So I decided to rewrite the ad, which is the sample I'm actually going to give you guys, that talks about the admin role. And at the end of the day, you're applying for the admin position, but I expect you to be passionate about fitness, because I'm going to turn around and get you certified and put this person in a training role about 30 to 40% of the time. So that was the first thing I asked. It wasn't clear on her resume what her experience was with fitness, but it said clearly in the ad that they must be a fitness enthusiast. So I wanted to know what was her personal experience with working out and her current fitness goals. And then the second thing was her job history in this particular case was pretty good, except for her last position. She was there for a fairly short period of time. And it was also ended in July, and it's now November, and she has no current employment history. So I wondered what she'd been doing from now till then. And as you can see, you can read her response. I used to work out every day for an hour and a half. I hate having to talk myself into working out, but I love feeling the satisfaction I got from the workout. My current fitness goals are to get in better shape and maintain. I left the registry because I wasn't happy doing it. I didn't enjoy it, and I couldn't see myself doing it forever. And this was the part that I love the most. I want to make my passions a career. I don't want to wake up and dread going to work. I like when work doesn't feel like work. I want my work to reflect my lifestyle. I want to be excited to go to work. Since I left the registries, I've not been working. Once I left, I decided not to accept a job unless I truly felt I would enjoy it. I feel this job is one that I can be successful in life. I loved those answers. I know this person has no experience in the fitness industry, but I love the fact that they say that I'm not really interested in working for the sake of working, that I want to work somewhere that I enjoy, and I want it to reflect who I am and be part of my life. That totally earned an interview for me. So She responded within minutes of me contacting her back with these questions, and I responded within minutes again to set her up with my manager and get her in for an interview. So let's talk about what we do with first interview, because I think you'll find this interesting. We don't start with an interview at all. The very first thing, it doesn't matter what position you apply for within our organization, we invite you in for a workout. You're there to be just like any other client. You won't be introduced as anyone special. In fact, we'll treat you exactly the same way we would treat a client. We'll fill out the health questionnaire, we'll review it. If there's no injuries or things preventing you from working out, you work out, with everyone else. And I make a point to have my manager meet with them after the workout. As you can see here, I have two big objectives for that. But the first one and most important one is really the gut feelings of the manager. What do they think of this person? How do they think they will get along and fit with the rest of our team? We base that on two things. Any questions that she asks, what her gut feeling is by meeting this person and feeling with them for 5 minutes. I've often said I have three things in my mind that I try to answer within 30 seconds. Do I like this person? Would I like to work with them? Would I possibly invite this person to my home as a guest? And would I feel comfortable having them in my home? And based on that 30-second gut feeling, do I think I could trust this person with money? Those three things are three of the most very important things for us when we decide to hire somebody. But I also have the manager kind of peek at them if the manager isn't coaching or teaching that particular boot camp. I have them kind of peek in on them or ask the trainer after the workout, how was their performance? And I'm not worried about how fit they were, but we want to see, how did they relate to the other people? How did they participate in camp? Did they really give it their all? Did they show signs of being really awkward, nervous, and uncomfortable in that environment? Because frankly, they should be. But if they displayed that openly, I think it's going to be very hard for them to succeed in our environment, coach and manage others, and deal with the kind of day-to-day chaos that we tend to create. So it really is that gut check moment of how did this person jump in and how did they blend in an uncomfortable environment. The second objective is far less important, but still of importance. And we ask, and this is straight up from Lou Adler again, we ask, what's the most significant achievement? A question. We try to ask this multiple times in multiple different ways. What have you done that you're most proud of? What is your most proud or significant work accomplishment to date? What is your most proud or significant personal achievement to date? What kind of awards have you won? So we follow up on that again. Find out those things that show that this person has that pattern or behavior of being a winner, a champion, an achiever, or somebody that continues to invest in themselves. I think these days, even as leaders and employers, it's the most valuable lesson that we can pass on to our employees is that it's not you, the boss, that decides the success or total outcome of their future, but them and how they choose to continue to invest in themselves. So foster that environment from day one, much like we foster that same thing with our clients. All right, guys, I can't believe it, but that's like the end of part one already. So hopefully that gives you a really good place to start in terms of deciding on how to set up your recruiting, because this initial stage and who we interview and who we talk to is, of course, probably the most important thing. I mean, don't waste your time talking to the wrong people. We've all heard the verbiage of hire slow and fire fast. In this case, these are the steps that we take to hire slow, and we'll talk about this even more in part two with where we go from here. I guess just to give you a kind of a prelude or summary to that, after the first interview with my manager, if it's looking good, they will set up the second telephone interview with me, where I'll be a little bit more thorough and make the final decision whether we're going to progress this person into an internship. As far as the prospect is concerned, it's that internship that really forms the bulk of interview two. But we're going to talk about that in detail on the next webinar. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop the video now, and I've got time for just a few questions. So if anybody has any questions, I'll help you out here in just a second.